Hello ladies and gentlemen, Willie here. With TBC confirmed, it's about time we did a little bit of a class update. Let's take a look back at each class in the Burning Crusade, their performance overall, and hopefully help you make your choice moving forwards. We will be looking at what's new in terms of talents and abilities, leveling, PvE, who's the new king of the meta, PvP has much changed, and tier sets which actually exist for every specialization now. And through this I hope to answer, is your class any better now? And today, coming through the Dark Portal for the first time, we have a very special class. One that underwent some big changes from vanilla to TBC. I present the Rogue... Wait, where's he at? I said to be here at this time. What's that? The Rogue, the class that awoke the edgy teen within us long before the Death Knight ever walked Azeroth, stealth daggers and teleporting behind you. Now, I'm sure if you've seen any other TBC videos about this class, there is quite a bit of doomsaying about the state of how the Rogue goes moving from vanilla over to TBC, especially when it comes to PvE. There is a lot riding on things which, as I'm doing this video, are still to be determined. How long are fights going to be? How will certain spells interact with each other? Is your raid spot truly gone? Do I need to re-roll, or can I still play a melee class and do fine? Hopefully I'll be able to talk you through and allow you to make your decision depending on what kind of environment you are playing in. Be it from a guy who considers themselves very casual to somebody who enjoys getting the most possible out of their class. Well, let's go over the things we get baseline, and then as we look at PvE and later PvP, we can cover the more specialization specific things. Deadly Throw is new in the Assassination tree. This uses your combo points for an instant ranged attack, slowing the target's movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds, with a nice upgrade from the PvP gloves to also add an interrupt on that same effect, because as we will see in the PvP section later, rogues go to pretty insane power levels during this expansion. But this ability is only ever really used during PvP scenarios. Envenom was also added in TBC. It works just like Eviscerate, but it does nature damage, so bypassing all armor. On the downside in TBC, it consumes 1 stack of deadly poison per combo point used, and it never really came into use too much throughout any area in the expansion. Armor reducing effects ended up being more effective than ones that increased nature damage, so players just opted into using Eviscerate for a big damaging finishing move. Shiv was added to the combat tree. This ability that scaled its energy cost with your weapon speed instantly applies your offhand weapon poison, making it a versatile ability you should definitely keep in mind. In PvE to keep stacks of deadly poison up if needed, and most of the time in PvP to guarantee applying a crippling poison or a mind-numbing poison. It also grants 1 combo point. In the Subtlety tree we have Cloak of Shadows. Probably one of the most overpowered abilities ever added to any class ever. It removes all harmful spell effects apart from CCs that stop you acting, like Hand of Justice or Polymorph, and gives you a 90% chance to resist them for 5 seconds. So there is a small chance you cloak and then get instantly hit by a frostbite proc, for example, but most casters will just go full on defensive mode versus this though. It's not really worth playing into the odds most of the time. Finally, new poisons, or just buffs to poisons I should say. They now last 1 hour baseline instead of having charges. Blind no longer needs blinding powder, however Vanish still needs flash powder though because reasons. You get to use deadly poison in PvE now because the debuff cap is raised to 40. Wound poison gets an enormous buff. Now instead of reducing flat healing, it's percentage based up to 50% at 5 stacks, making it very strong in PvP. Finally we have anesthetic poison, which I genuinely totally forgot exists until doing this video. It's basically instant poison that doesn't do any threat. So yeah, I mean if poisons are causing you to over aggro on a regular basis, then I'm not really sure what to say about that. As for leveling, first of all, a lot of the quests as of a later patch in TBC are now toned down to have far fewer elite mobs in them. Think areas like Jinthar Lore in the Hinterlands or Strongguard in the Raffi Highlands, making solo quest content a lot more simple for a class that can typically have issues without having their full set of cooldowns. Rogues still have no self-healing beyond bandages or potions. Combat is still really the go-to spec, though honestly the PvP specs still aren't even that bad for leveling either, and let's be honest, we would all want to have things like Shadow Step be part of our kit baseline, not to mention all the lower energy costs that sub has that just makes it feel a lot more fluid to play. Deep Assassination into Mutilate doesn't really get much of a look in, Being a spec that requires you to be behind your target to do damage, whilst leveling has never really worked out that well, but there isn't really too much other to look at than that here. So then, PvE. PvE as a rogue. Where do we begin? As I'm sure you know, in Classic, rogues are the second best overall DPS. Mages can be up there, but they're all working as a team to build a big ignite, whilst warriors are the clear number one. However, moving through the Dark Portal, things change. Early on, rogues take a pretty big fall on the meters, and this isn't just exclusive to rogues either. The early tiers in the Burning Crusade are packed with really melee-unfriendly mechanics. On top of this, if you stuck, well, just about any melee class, say versus a warlock or a hunter on a patchwork target dummy, they are not going to be keeping up. But then again, there are other classes that we know about in TBC and specializations that will nearly always be finding themselves a raid spot, not because of their damage, but what they can offer to increase the raid's performance as a whole. Your Boonkins, your Ret Pallies, your Enhanced Shaman, surely the Rogue has something similar. They have Kick, that's nice, I mean other classes can do that. Kidney Shot is a unique stun that doesn't share a DR with anything else, that's really good. Think fights like Satur in Classic. Disarm Trap in the Suppression Room in BWL. Is there anything like that in TBC? Well, no, there isn't. What's left then? So we have the damage the rogue can bring, as well as expose armor. And I'm going to end up talking about expose armor quite a bit more than I expected, and I'll probably start calling it EA as well. Because as far as unique selling points go, that's what the rogue has got, apart from their damage of course, and that damage profile may not end up coming really strong until deep into tier 6. But it depends. If we get nerfed content and much shorter fights than expected, combat can absolutely still pump on the meters. They've still got Blade Flurry, Adrenaline Rush on top of their Trinket, perhaps even Drums, Blood Fury, and a Bloodlust on top of that. Stack them up and the yellows will still be relevant. It's just after the cooldowns have worn out, so does the damage until late game gearing. Let's talk about the new specialization stuff and what you should expect to be using in PvE encounters, then we can talk about rogue damage and EA usage a little bit more. For the assassination tree, Garrote now has a 3-second silence attached to it because what rogues really needed in TBC is more CC. There isn't all that much new to this tree other than that, to be honest. We have some interesting new talents like Find Weakness, but you rarely go this far down into this talent tree. Mutilate is the end of tree ability, instantly attacking with both weapons that both must be daggers, and a 50% increased damage modifier versus poisoned targets. Unfortunately, you have to be behind the target. Mutilate is just straight up not really used for anything. I mean, it does good damage, but on the downside, it's got a very high energy cost, a positional requirement, and you need 2 good daggers. Those are a lot of boxes to tick when you could just be pressing Sinister Strike and be good. As for the combat tree, this is what you're more or less always going to be playing in PvE. New stuff rogues get include Evasion now has a 25% chance to dodge ranged attacks. Mace Spec now gives some more crit on top of the stun chance, which has its own DR. Combat Potency gives your offhand a 20% chance to generate some energy, so you definitely want to find a very fast offhand to make the most of this. Weapon skill on items and talents is gone, as you can see here, and has been replaced with Expertise, which is a new stat for TBC that decreases an enemy's chance to dodge and parry, just another thing to consider capping alongside your hit. And at the end of the tree we have Surprise Attacks that makes your main abilities do 10% more damage and no longer be able to be dodged. It's kind of a forgettable end of tree ability really. Here is a ballpark kind of specialization you may see. Pretty much everything you see in the combat tree is quite set in stone as for what you will want to use to boost your DPS, including those new talents which we just went over. In the assassination tree, some people prefer more points in Eviscerate, some into Murder, but it depends whether or not you are expected to be using improved exposed armor. There are of course variations on the build depending on what your best available weapons are. It's pretty self-explanatory. Take points out of sword, put them into whatever you're using. Unless you have daggers where you have to move some points out from the assassination tree over to opportunity and the sub tree. But let's talk expose armor. It's in the build here. Here's the tooltip. 2050 armor reduced to baseline. So we talent that and we're looking at a reduction of 3075. A 5-stack Thunder armor from a warrior or a Devastate, they both do the same thing, is 520 times 5, so 2600. That means IEA is better. These two abilities do not stack, and Sunder, if I understand it correctly, will not overwrite an improved exposed armor, or in fact to be able to be used at all. It should say a more powerful spell is currently active. This means an IEA target will stop any prot warrior tanks, which will still be very popular, from using Devastate as a threat generator. Now there are a lot of things to be taken in here. Warriors are expected to be deep prot. Will warriors be able to keep threat up without using Sunder versus classes like Hunters or Warlocks blasting on the bosses? Deep prot does get Shield Slam, it still has Revenge, Demo Shout, and Heroic Strike as well. It's hardly lacking on threat generation ability. What did guilds do back in actual TBC though? Well, let's take a look. Here we have the world first kill of Nihilum versus Illidan in the Black Temple, and somewhere through the pixels I can quite clearly make out a 5-stack Sunder right there. So Black Temple, 5 Sunder was still used. Nihilum again versus Archimonde. Taking another look at the tooltips there, once again I see a 5-stack of Sunder. SK Gaming versus Kil'jaeden though, interestingly enough, no Sunder, they are using Expose Armor instead. And this was the guild that finally dethroned Nihilum, who had been sitting at the top for the whole of TBC. You wonder if this kind of adaptation to try new things had a place in making that happen. And let's just say if you were to look at the fan server side of things for competitive guilds, quite literally every rogue is improved Expose Armor. It's very much looking like it's going to be a thing from what I can see, and it will impact your personal performance to improve the raid overall. Between already wanting to prio your main spender of Slice and Dice, your second after that is likely going to be making sure IEA remains up all of the time. Instead of Rupture, and Eviscerate is pushed even further down in priority. Then again, Warglaives are a thing. As for who gets them, Rogue versus Fury, well, that's an entirely different topic. I'll just say there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of Guildmaster or Raid Leader warriors at the moment who probably have their eyes on them. And if binding drop rates are anything to go by, it's hardly a sure thing. All this conversation about a 475 armor difference on a target though, there should still be a spot for a rogue overall. Those agility daggers might as well go somewhere, right? And they scale really well. By Sunwell, even without glaives, even still doing IEA, they will start to push up on the meters. They're just a bit more of a slow burner of a class. I would expect even min-max guilds to want to pick up one dedicated rogue. You just might not be in for every single kill depending on boss difficulty. On the more casual side, it's true raid slots are a bit more limited in TBC, but if you're the guy showing up, getting involved, boosting your less adept guildies in PvP to get their PvE bis, which is a thing for many classes, I think you'll be fine. What's new for sub then? Well, there are more than just a few improvements, but I think I'll save them for the next section, which is PvP. And I've managed to get hold of some of the footage from the beta back from TBC of when Blizzard were working on changes for rogues in PvP, so this is a bit exclusive and maybe I shouldn't be sharing it, but just keep it a little bit on the down low for me, okay? Here it is. Alrighty, that's Warlock done, looks pretty balanced. What's next? Ah, of course, rogues. Man, that whole stun lock thing they had going back in vanilla was pretty crazy. Maybe we should dial that back a little.
You know what I hate, Mark?
What's that, John?
Getting kited. That's no fun.
Well, rogues do have Vanish and Sprint. Those are both used for...
No, we need more. Rogues should have Charge, but better. Something like Malignant Displacer of Shadow. Hatred of...
What about Shadow Step?
Oh, okay, that works. You know what else I don't like? Magic. It shouldn't be a thing. Does damage, stops me going into stealth, not a fan. We need something to remove all magic, like Deceptive, Shade of Evil.
We could call it a Cloak of...
Shadows.
Sure, yeah, let me just write that one down.
Mages, you know when you stun them and they just blink away? That isn't fair. Rogues need a silence.
Oh, and what's this going to be called, I suppose? Lethal... Shadow of Merciless Vengeance, Quietude of Stillness.
What are you talking about, Mark? Just put a silence on Garou.
Did you always have those shoulders on, John?
Well, good meeting, gotta go. I can sense a level 61 trying to do the PvP objectives in Hellfire Peninsula. Duty calls.
When it comes to PvP, rogues were given such a massive number of buffs to their already huge toolkit that they became one of the best, if not the overall best DPS class in Arena throughout the expansion. Let's bring up a spec here straight away. This is your standard 20-0-41 Shadow Step. Talents like Vile Poisons are vital to protect your wound poison stacks as well as your other ones. Don't forget that weapon swapping to Shiv is a viable tactic to apply mind-numbing poison against certain comps. The talents in the subtree here are quite set in stone. Sap no longer drops combat by default anymore, and the improved Sap talent is now changed to be much better, now reducing the cost and increasing the range of Sap and Blind. A fully talented Blind is a 15 yard, 15 energy, 1.5 minute cooldown, instant cast, 10 second CC, and yes, it's pretty overpowered. One of your key playmaking abilities. It's no longer a poison either, so take that dwarves and your niche racial, which could be used to get rid of it in classic. It's now a physical effect. Dirty Deeds now has an execute added on for all your abilities, because why not? Cheat Death, of course, another iconic rogue ability activated automatically once per minute to absorb an attack that would have been lethal, with all damage taken afterwards reduced scaling with your resilience, so it won't be quite as powerful as you remember it being if we release on 2.43, at least in the earlier seasons. And of course, Shadow Step, because one of the few things rogues were missing was good mobility. Fix that problem now. Keep in mind though, TBC Shadow Step is against enemies only. It was changed to against a target in a later expansion. You'll notice over in the Assassination tree that, again, improved expose armor is being taken. Why would you want that as a rogue in PvP? Well, look at it this way, armor scaling at low values is pretty big. A Season 3 or Season 4 gear caster would be somewhere around the 3k armor mark, depending on the class baseline, which means there'd be around 25% or so physical damage reduced. On the other hand, a target at 20k armor is only at about 65% reduced physical damage, so expose armor against squishy targets is boosting your damage massively, whilst being kinda negligible against very high armor targets. Imagine if EA said straight up do 20% more damage against clothies, because that's kind of what it's doing for you, then you would probably want to keep it up all the time. So yeah, if you want to PvP a lot in TBC and be a beast, you definitely want to consider Rogue. Let's move on and have a look at some tier sets now though. Just to give it a quick mention, there are 3 main raid tier sets that we will look at. The PvP sets are recolors apart from Season 4. However, PvP set bonuses never change between seasons, and the main interesting thing about the PvP tier is mainly just the interrupt on the gloves. As for PvE though, let's take a look. Tier 4, Neverblade from Karazhan, Magtheridon and Gruul's Lair. The 2 set, more slice and dice duration, that's your main spender, a small addition, but it should help you keep everything up and rolling as you need. The 4 set, 15% chance to get a combo point from a finisher, pretty small chance, but it adds up with a Ruthlessness talent and gives you a chance to get 2 combo points straight off a finisher, which isn't half bad. Tier 5, Death Mantle from Serpent Shrine Cavern and Tempest Keep. The looks on this set though, can we get any edgier? 2 set, 40 more damage per combo point on your big finishers. The big brains in the community will no doubt have this mathed out whether this is any better than pressing Rupture. The 4 set seems really nice, actually looks to have a pretty good proc rate as well. We'll have to see how it ends up being on the live server, and it would really make your life a lot easier in juggling all these different spenders you have to as a rogue. Tier 6, the Slayer set from Hyjal, Black Temple and the Sunwell. One of the best looking sets ever, and the bonuses are equally great by the looks of it. The 2 set is 5% more haste from Slice and Dice, that's great, it's your main spending ability that you're going to have up all the time. And the 4 set, 6% more damage from all your builders. Yep, that's pretty good. Rogues seem to be one of the classes where they don't really have any totally meh tier set bonuses on them. Can't say that's true for every class. So the Rogue, is it any better now? Well, in PvE, it'll be some time until you are back up near the top of the meters. You are considered to have quite a slow start to the expansion, as well as, at least it looks like, you're going to have a job of applying expose armor for potentially the whole duration of the expansion to buff physical damage for the whole raid. Mainly for the hunters though, quite the twist of fate from then giving you True Shot aura for the past year and a half or so. PvP, however, you start off as one of the best and you never give that position up. The class is just totally insane in Arena, can definitely recommend. I can also recommend checking out silentshadows.net. This is a player-run effort to create an informative community space packed with detail for rogue players in TBC. They've done interviews and more niche things that I didn't have time to get into here, like how diminishing returns work, stealth detection mechanics, more information on builds, why you want to take them, or other builds than ones I've covered here. And no, this isn't paid because I know I'll get asked in the comments, but I'm going to try and sell you on this site anyway, because when this much effort goes into a free resource out of love for the subject, it deserves to get more eyes on it. So if you liked what you heard in the video or wanted to get more in depth onto rogue mechanics or playing the class moving forwards, do give it a look. I'll link it below for you. With that said, I think that about wraps it up for the rogue. Do let me know if you would have mentioned any extra bits that I didn't. I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, I'll see you in the next one very soon.